protections in this plan for our citizens and for the city. First, on page 10 and in the appendix to the plan, there is a reference to a relocation plan. All property owners whose property is purchased after execution of a redevelopment agreement will receive relocation benefits. So we're going to have a redevelopment agreement for this RPAA and this RPAB, and once that redevelopment is executed, anybody who sells their property, whether voluntarily or whatever, they are entitled to relocation benefits. There are 3 levels of benefits, and they will depend on the purpose of the purchase. Next, we have minority and women's business participation requirements, and those are good faith efforts to observe Executive Order 28 as amended. We will take those requirements very seriously for this project, as we do on all of our projects, and work with the developer, with the contractors, with the co-developers to make sure the minority contractors have the best possible chance at getting work in this project. Next, we have Ordinance 68412. That is the apprenticeship bill that was passed, I want to say last July, and that will apply to any Board of Public Service contracts with estimated costs in excess of $1 million. And as I mentioned, there's $345 million worth of infrastructure in this project, and so we expect there to be a fair amount of BPS contracts that come out of this. Next, accessibility standards. There are more detailed accessibility standards that will be included in the redevelopment agreements, and Chairman Newberger has been working closely with the developer to make sure that this project will be accessible for everyone. Next, many of us were concerned about the growth in the tax base all going to the TIF. So what we have negotiated conceptually and what we will negotiate in detail before this becomes a redevelopment agreement is that a portion of the growth in the base taxes will be passed on to the city and other taxing districts. And again, this will be finalized in the redevelopment agreement so that the taxes won't just be frozen, they will actually grow and come back to these taxing districts that we're negotiating here. Next, and this was very important to the aldermen who represent this area, there are maintenance provisions for the parcels that the developer owns and provisions about the demolition and rehabilitation of structures that the developer owns. The redevelopment agreements, and it says this in the plan on page 16, are going to provide for the developer to remain in compliance with the city's property maintenance ordinance, to maintain their parcels in a good state of repair and attractiveness, and keep the buildings secure. In calendar year 2010, the developer will identify buildings for demolition, and if and only if the city approves those demolitions, the developer will demolish them. Further, the developer will identify buildings for rehab and rehab them no later than 2011. Finally, and this is something that we've learned from other TIFs that we've done on a district basis, we've made it very clear in the plan that within this bigger area there will be incentives available for other developers if the city approves them. So we do not want to preclude other developers from taking initiative to develop their own properties if the master developer or the co-developers weren't doing it. Finally, and this I think is important to many of you, this particular plan contains no authority for anyone to do eminent domain. That it is true. It is just what the plan says is that it is possible in a TIF plan for the TIF itself to make eminent domain possible. This plan does not do that, and it does not make it possible for anybody to do eminent domain. However, it is possible that eminent domain may take place in the future for infrastructure and for development. But it is not a contradiction. If you would let me finish, okay? This legislation will not have anything to to do with eminent domain. If there is ever going to be eminent domain, there will be another public hearing, and there will be new legislation, and there will be new ordinances, and your alderman will have a chance to decide either to introduce that legislation or not. So this plan does not have anything about eminent domain.
Well, then why don't you do one parcel at a time instead of doing all these acres of land?
That's what I'm saying. This does not have anything to do with eminent domain, and I'm not going to take questions.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
not going to get into this kind of dialogue.
Okay, so there will have to be additional legislation, not on a big area basis, but on a parcel by parcel basis, passed by the Board of Aldermen to do eminent domain, and there will have to be notices given to the property owners about eminent domain being in that plan is required by law, and there will have to be aldermen representing you all who are convinced that the developer has pursued and exhausted efforts for voluntary acquisition at prices the aldermen deem reasonable. So there is no eminent domain in this plan, and there will be no eminent domain unless there is additional legislation. There will also be, according to the alderman, no eminent domain ever for owner-occupant residences and churches. And I also want to point out that there is a blighting study that finds the area blighted. That does not in any way, shape, or form mean that the property is eminent domain. Blighting is simply a designation that some of you, I think, may have had your property blighted so you could receive tax abatement. It does not mean that there's going to be eminent domain. So the language from the plan, if you want to read it, is sitting out there, and I think, in summary, there's no eminent domain in this plan. Next.